Thank you, Mike. Thank you all. Good afternoon. I'm Cameron Oskvig, as Mike already described. I'm the director of the Board on Infrastructure and Constructed Environment. I'm joined by one of my board members, Jack Dempsey, who served on several of our committees and is on our board for his expertise in asset management. What I do and what the Board on Infrastructure does is we don't manage infrastructure, we don't manage funding. Rather, we manage a portfolio of peer-reviewed advisory services. Like Mike described earlier, we don't bring problems to the table, we try to bring solutions to the table, and one of those is in implementation of asset management systems approaches. I'm going to describe our portfolio of activities today, a portfolio which highlights a diversity of different kinds of activities, but also demonstrates a goal to deliver value through infrastructure. Most of our studies focus on the efficient and effective management or delivery of infrastructure or support future infrastructure investment. And so I'm just going to briefly talk about our portfolio and then turn it over to Jack to kind of tie a bow around it and piece it all together in the world of asset management. So all right, so the Board on Infrastructure advises on questions of technology, science, and public policy in any aspect of the built environment. And it's also the relationship between the construction and the natural environments. We've been a long-standing board in the National Academies since 1946. The BICE members were chaired by General Tom Bostic, former chief of the Army Corps of Engineers, and a diverse group of smart people, including Jack Dempsey. We're a cross-collaborator, so when we say infrastructure, it's the big word infrastructure, it's across all sectors of infrastructure. The National Academies has boards in each of these infrastructure areas, but we cross-collaborate in the general term of infrastructure. Our principal disciplines include construction, civil engineering, facilities management, public administration, social science, environmental science, and economics. Some focus areas include life cycle, any part of the life cycle, including applications of technology, federal real property, workforce issues, resilience, sustainability. A big area for us right now, partly because of COVID, is human factors in the built environment, so health and productivity in the built environment, climate change, and other areas. So in describing our activities, I kind of pithy put together a title on refrigerators, telescopes, and soda bottles. So this is the refrigerator section. We recently published a report on the review methods for setting and building equipment performance standards. The link for that report is in this slide. In that report, we reviewed the assumptions, models, and analytical methods that DOE uses in the quantitative portion for setting appliance standards. The appliance standards are the minimum standards the DOE sets for things such as dishwashers, residential furnaces, commercial refrigerators. In that report, we describe how DOE can improve its analyses and align regulatory analyses with the best practices, and we reviewed these three representative standards in doing so. The recommendations within that report included organizing standards analyses around long-standing regulatory impact analyses framework. We also provide specific recommendations for presenting uncertainty and variability in estimates and quantifying different impacts, and for gathering data to improve future analyses. And we also encouraged DOE in the report to use the role of the standards to change the environment and avoid standards that would impede innovation. There's a lot more detail to those recommendations, so if you're interested in the appliance standards, please feel free to just Google or download the report from the National Academy Press. One of our other studies is a forensic engineering study on the causes of failure and collapse of the 305-meter telescope at Arecibo Observatory in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Now, this committee is looking at explaining the contributing factors and probable causes to failure, but one of the key aspects of the report is also recommendations to prevent similar damage to other facilities in the future. Other facilities could be large facilities in a tropical region in the same type of tropical environment, or it could include large scientific unique facilities like Arecibo was. An environmental study that we're doing is the repurposing of plastics waste and infrastructure. That committee right now is presently meeting, and as Mike said, I'm skipping out on that committee session to be here. But what we're looking to do is identify opportunities for repurposing plastic waste in infrastructure. The role of my board is to look at all of the ways that we could do that in infrastructure other than transportation infrastructure, or actually other than pavement infrastructure. So we're looking at things such as pipes, compressed structural units, geosynthetics, and applications in concrete and other structural materials. One of the key aspects of that study is to look at the upstream portion to see if there's a way that we can manufacture plastics that would make them more readily usable as a in reuse and as a recycled component to infrastructure. In the asset management and funding areas, this one is sponsored by the Federal Facilities Council, and I've talked several times at ALN events about a strategy to renew federal facilities, where the goal is to ensure that federal property is being effectively and efficiently managed, and to renew federal's agency real property portfolio to achieve mission objectives and obligations. Some considered outcomes in that study include asset management portfolio approaches, greater ability to generate and audit real property requirements and expenditure balance sheets, some performance measures linking functionality to agency objectives and goals, a discussion around renewal funding through access to P3s or revolving capital funding, and ability to communicate a asset management systems approach to agency budget offices and senior leaders on the impacts of funding of facility investments. Key audiences for this include OMB, agency budget offices, the Federal Real Property Council, and capital planning programs across a number of agencies. In capital planning, we're doing a study around the technical assessment for the capital facility needs of the National Institute of Science, Technology and Testing, and NIST. We've done this study before for NIH, where we've been asked to identify the infrastructure in greatest need of repair, assess the composition of the capital and repair projects, evaluate the cost estimates, and provide approaches that NIST could consider in developing a comprehensive capital strategy. We've been asked by the Department of Energy, actually Congress requested this through a defense authorization, to review the effectiveness and efficiency of the defense environmental cleanup activities of the Department of Energy's environmental management program. So these are the nuclear cleanup sites, your Hanfords. In this study, our committee is looking at the project and program management practices and policies that DOE-EM employs, and providing both short-term and long-term ways to improve those to accelerate the closing of sites and to limit the liabilities that these sites have to America's national security. In sustainability and investment, we are executing a workshop on mathematical approaches for optimizing infrastructure investments to enhance urban sustainability. In this workshop, we're looking to optimize work plans under constrained resources, evaluate best value delivery methodologies for public works, utilize data from sensing, the Internet of Things, information and communication technologies. And then another aspect is to explore the potential socioeconomic impact of the investment choices, the social justice and the other socioeconomic impacts of those investments. And then the longest standing activity of the Board on Infrastructure and Constructed Environment is the Federal Facilities Council, which is a cooperative association of federal agencies, around 24, who ask the national academies to identify and advance technologies and processes that better help them manage the stuff that the federal government owns or construct future facilities. So any part of the life cycle for the federal government in the real property owning agencies. We're also developing some new activity around innovation and technology for robotic use in search and rescue, in environmental and industrial hygiene, in standing up a health in buildings roundtable, and in construction safety with the National Academy of Construction around introducing and embedding safety culture concepts in undergraduate engineering education. So that is a broad sort of stroke portfolio of what the Board on Infrastructure and Constructive Environment is doing right now. And I'm sure it ties together with a lot of the things that ALN is investigating through the asset management systems process.
Well, what do you do in your spare time, Cameron?
I attend ALN network events.
Well, there's nothing more important than dealing with the plastic. So thank you for taking time away from that. And we do not mind you leaving us for that. But we do want to transition to Jack Dempsey before we let you leave. You recommend people to the board? What's the process that Jack went through to become a board member?
So when we're looking for board members, we try to create a diverse group of experiences, of backgrounds, of educations, of geographies, of a number of sort of as diverse as we can make in the area of the topics that the board is focused on. A lot of our work has been around asset management over the last 30 years. It's around how does the federal government help manage this giant bulk of infrastructure that it owns and that is deteriorating. And so asset management has been a key to that. And so Jack is part of a long-standing group of people that have served on the board for expertise in asset management and facility management and those areas. The way we find people is usually through recommendations from the national academies themselves. So we have honorific societies, the National Academy of Engineering, Science, and Medicine, through our networks and through recommendations from organizations when we reach out to them. In terms of studies, so that group of studies that I went through, we have a more select group of expertise or a more select need for expertise. We highlight those expertise in our proposals and then are expected by our executive committees to go out and seek the top experts in those fields and put them in our studies so they can help answer questions. The key thing about the National Academy's volunteers, the people that serve on our boards and our studies, they are volunteers. They are not paid for their time. And so the product that they produce has to reach a consensus agreement. So every person on that committee has to say, I agree with what's written in this report, and I agree with the findings and recommendations. And then it is also peer reviewed by another group of experts to make sure that key aspects have been well documented, that it's supported by evidence, and that it meets the requirements of the National Academy's independence and non-bias.